from that. That's why, in general, let's just take that definition. Again, even if you don't agree with it, just to make the discussion actually easier, that science is a tool. Science is a tool to get information. That's what it is. So science provides you information of the physical world. Underline that. So it's not something that deals with something outside of that, of the physical world, the world that we live in, using two main tools, which are observation and experimentation. Okay? So this is, let's say, again, it's not agreed upon by everybody, but let's say the most agreed upon definition of science. Now, what about the definition of religion? That's when it gets messy. What is the definition of religion? How would you define religion? Anyone can give me a definition.
In religion, there is a God at the core of it.
So it's religion is what? Is something that has a God in the middle of it? Yes, I'm back there. It's a set of beliefs that people act on it. Okay, that's good. And normally it has God, or basically a divine being that is central to it. Okay, not everybody agrees to that, by the way, because some believe that a person can be spiritual without being religious in a certain way, and they say as such that if you are in a set of spiritual system, that is considered to be a religion. And by the way, believe it or not, some even include atheists under that, under certain situations. So a religion, again, this is good, by the way. I'll give you the definition that we'll be using for the discussion, but I want to hear some more definitions from you. Yes, Rahim.
Is a set of beliefs, but to set your morals and ethics.
So it's a system basically with certain moral ethics or certain guidelines that follow that, and that has basically a divine being at the center of it. Okay, anybody else?
A way of life.
A way of life. This is what we believe, this is how we define it among ourselves, right? Islam is a comprehensive way of life. Here's just to parallel the definition of science. If we said that science is a tool to attain knowledge of the physical world using observation and experimentation, then religion is a tool to acquire information about the metaphysical world using revelation. Using revelation. Yes, of course. I mean, for the religion that you believe in yourself. And I'll come back to that, by the way. Okay? So, but this is how you can define religion, because other religions, they claim the same thing, that they have revelation. It's revelation. So that's why, so first of all, I think the first difference between the two is that one deals with the physical, the other one deals with the metaphysical. So the scope of both is different, even though they overlap. And I'll come back to the overlap and the interaction. But in general, they deal with different scopes. So science deals with the physical world, and as such, it uses physical tools. Now, if religion deals with the metaphysical world, you cannot use physical tools. You have to use different tools. Just like, for example, even in the worldly sciences and disciplines, different disciplines use different tools. So let's say, for example, a social scientist or a psychologist uses tools that are different than an astronaut, for example. You cannot demand to use the tools of an astronaut in dealing with a social science. And this is still within this world. So let alone we're talking about physical and metaphysical. That's why the tools of one are different than the tools of the other. And because the goal and the target is different. The target, again, is normally, in general, what one gives you is different than the other. Like, for example, when science tells you how to live your life, how to live healthy, how to eat healthy, religion tells you why you live your life. So it deals with something different. Even though sometimes they overlap, and I'll come back to that in a second, when we're talking about the interaction. Okay? So this is the general definition the general definitions of religion and science. We'll put that on hold for a second and we'll go back to it. Now, in Islam, science and any kind of knowledge is highly praised. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, the beginning was to acquire knowledge. The beginning. Again, about all kinds of knowledge. It is not specified, but all kinds of knowledge. Useful knowledge. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, اقرأ بِاسْمِ رَبِّكَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ. So even acquired knowledge has to be done in connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. That those that fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala among His servants are those that have knowledge. يرفع الله الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات. Allah raises those that have knowledge and those that have iman into higher status. قل هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون. Are they equal, those that have knowledge and those that do not have knowledge? So that's why knowledge is praised in Islam. And if you look historically, you'll find that the Muslim scholars have contributed significantly to the various advancements of science. And unlike the way it happened with the other religions, the Muslim scholars or the scholars that were Muslims, were also strongly founded in Islamic knowledge. In the West, in the Western world, the scientific advancement happened when science was separated from religion. That's how it happened. In the Islamic history, the opposite happened. The opposite happened. The period of religious development and success coincided with the period of scientific advancements. That's why you find someone like Al-Khwarizmi, for example, who is the father of algebra. Algebra is Arabic for al-jabr. It's an Arabic word. You'll find that basically he was founded solidly, actually, in Islamic knowledge as well. And the reason he wrote the algebra and the different rules is to make sure he provides formula to deal with laws of inheritance in Islam. So that's why it was connected with religion, unlike it is in the West. In the West, there was a separation between the two. And it's really important to keep in mind that the present achievements of science are not to be credited to one specific culture, because they have been the results of the accumulation of contributions through history. So for example, if let's say Europe or the US have the lead in technological advancement today, it doesn't mean the credit goes to them. Because what we have today, would not have been possible without the contributions of the earlier civilizations, whether the Greek, whether the Indians, the Egyptians, and the Muslims as well. So again, the achievements of today are the accumulation of the earlier. They did not just start. So let's say, for example, again, like what we're talking about our country here, the US. We did not start everything from zero. We took what happened earlier and we built on it. So again, there were different civilizations or groups that contributed differently through the different periods of history. And these cannot be ignored. So that's why the credit has to be shared with them. It's not only for the one who has the final edge, so to speak, in that. And if you look, like I said, historically, the Muslims have contributed significantly in many fields. So you have someone, for example, like Ibn al-Haytham, al-Haytham, in English, Ibn al-Haytham, who was considered to be the father of optics. He laid down the foundations of optics, and he's the one that invented the camera obscura. The camera is qamara, comes from Arabic. So he's the one that invented the concept of the box and how the image is reversed and all of that. That's him, Ibn al-Haytham. And again, like Al-Khwarizmi, like Ibn Sina, like all of these scientists that have contributed actually significantly, and there are books, by the way, that have written about that, some of the significance. But like I said, the important thing when you look at that historically is that the period of success, so to speak, or development, Islamically coincided with the period of scientific advancement. There was no separation between the two. the way it happened in the West, where basically the success or the development or the revival only happened after the two were separated. And you look historically, by the way, like I said, you'll find some of these contributions still exist. Like the two oldest universities that are still operational today are in Muslim worlds. The oldest one, the very oldest one, which one is it? What is it called?
Universities?
Yeah. Al-Qayrawan, of course, which was founded by a Muslim lady, right? I mean, it was a Muslim lady who founded that university, Fatima Fihri, and that university is still operational today. By the way, you're talking about, I think, like 1,200 years, And the second oldest university, of course, is Al-Azhar. So the two oldest universities that are still in operation today are actually in the Muslim worlds. So we started way earlier. Of course, we lost it through time, but we started way earlier. And these things cannot be ignored, by the way, even in some of the areas that you would not expect. Like, for example, Timbuktu. Where's Timbuktu? Normally people think that if you're traveling far, you go to Timbuktu. Where's Timbuktu? Timbuktu actually was called the city of knowledge, which is in Mali. So people that used to basically travel to learn, they would go there to Mali. It was advanced. And by the way, believe it or not, there was a period of time where the language of science was Arabic. Just like today, the language of science is English, everywhere in the world. But there was a time where the language of science was Arabic. So history is not like 200 years old only. There was something that happened before that. We had that. Again, I'm not looking back to say that, we used to be good, but these are the facts. That there was a time where the Muslim scientists contributed. That's why Muslims don't have problem with science. I'll come back to some of the specifics a little later. So again, Muslims have contributed significantly to science, and the achievements of today cannot be credited to one specific civilizations. There have to be actually a lot of credit. And if you look, inshallah, in the book, there will be some examples as well as some references regarding actually some of these things. Now, going back to the interaction between science and religion and the definition that I gave earlier. So science is a tool to attain knowledge through observation and experimentation. Okay? And the other one is through revelation. Do they overlap? Does science and religion overlap?
Yes.
Why do they overlap, and then how and where?
Religion uses science.
Give me some specifics.
سنريكم آياتنا في الآفاق.
What?
So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that we should show them our signs. Right?
Okay. I need more. Anybody else? What? Okay, so sometimes they overlap in that sometimes some of the religious teachings will have a scientific nature, for example. Like when Allah says, "Kulu washrabu wa la tusrifu." This is basically, it's a command from the religion that has a scientific basis. Eat and drink and do not overdo it, for example. Or for example, so here are certain guidelines, like for example, the moon sighting, or certain things that Islam provides certain guidance for, but it has a religious flavor, okay? Or sometimes science can be used as a tool to prove something. Like for example, some of the miraculous aspects of the Quran, where certain scientific findings are mentioned in the Quran that could not have been discovered at that time, but they're meant to be a tool to prove basically the divine nature of the revelation of the Quran. Okay? So here science can overlap with religion, and these are examples of that. But in general, the Quran is not meant to book of science. Like somebody once asked me, what does the Quran say about dinosaurs? I said, why does the Quran have to say anything about dinosaurs? I mean, the Quran is not meant to be a book of natural history. This is not what the Quran is meant for. That's why it doesn't mention that. So the Quran is not a complete book in that regard, because they say, well, but it's a complete book. The Quran is a complete book for what it is meant to be. It's a complete book of guidance. But it's not a complete book on chemistry, on physics, because it is not meant to be for that. Okay? So that's why the Quran sometimes, again, uses or mentions something that has scientific implications for a different purpose, either to prove, again, the text, or because of a guidance. Okay? So sometimes they might overlap together. Put that on hold for a little bit, I'll come back to it. The knowledge that comes through science can be categorized as two. A lot of the time, when we say that this comes from science, then automatically we assume that this is conclusive, it's a fact, it comes from science. And that's not that's not true, by the way. Because some of the, by the way, I'm talking as a scientist. I mean, I happen to have both hats, because I don't have any hair. I have two hats. You know, that as a scientist, not all the information that we have from science is conclusive, is certain. Some of the information that comes from science is uncertain, but some of it is certain. Okay? So some of it is certain, like what? What would be something that science gives us that is certain?
The earth is spherical. That's
The what?
the earth is
So
spherical.
some of the facts, and some of the physical laws. Some of the physical laws are certain. Relation between, let's say, volume and pressure and something like that, temperature and all of these things. So some of these physical laws are certain. And some of the facts, scientific facts, that's like an example of that, you know, are certain. But not everything that comes from science is certain. Actually, anybody's involved with the statistical analysis. You know, statistical analysis, when you do that, you report the results with what we call a certain confidence level, a certain percentage level. It's never 100%, by the way. Let's say 90, depending on, by the way, the fields, some values are expected, you know, to be higher than in others. Like, you know, in the humanities, it could be lower versus in the physical sciences. So here, the results are basically presented with a certain confidence level. Statistically, it's a statistical proof. A statistical proof is not a conclusive proof, by the way. Because statistically, I can prove to you that the earth is flat. I can prove to you, of course it's wrong, you know? But I can do that, I can play with that. Now, I'm not dismissing the statistical analysis, by the way. But what I'm saying is that that knowledge is not certain. So not everything that comes from science is certain. And again, I'm not dismissing science. I'm a scientist myself. So we work with these things. But not everything in science that comes from science, sometimes it is more likely with 99% confidence level or something like that. So not everything is conclusive in science. Certain things are conclusive, certain things are not conclusive in science. Okay? So not everything. So if I were to have a diagram, I'll come back. So here you have science. So the knowledge that comes from science can be certain or can be uncertain. Okay? Now the knowledge that comes from religion can also be certain or uncertain. The religion can be certain or uncertain. Okay? Now, so when we're talking about science being certain, I gave an example of what that means. That this has to do, for example, with the physical laws and the facts. And not everything, the majority of the scientific findings, by the way, are uncertain. But uncertain doesn't mean confusing, by the way. No, it's uncertain and it could be credible, you know. And the same thing when it comes to religion. Some knowledge can be certain, some knowledge can be uncertain. An example of the certain, what do I mean by certain knowledge in religion that is certain? Like what? What are we talking about? Alhamdulillah.
Like whatever God told us about in the Quran, like the prophets, the presidents,
Okay.
The books.
So whatever comes in the Quran.
Whatever God told us about.
Okay.
Like this happened, I
Okay.
said this, I did this.
So let me ask you something. So is everything that's in the Quran certain?
No. I mean.
Why not?
Yeah, certain, but some of it goes in under.
By the way, I know what you're talking about. You're right. Yes, yes. Awesome. It does. Okay, first of all, answer my question. Does everything, or is everything that's in the Quran certain? No? What's not certain in the Quran? Yes. You know, see, everything in the Quran is authentic. In other words, there's no question in what we call qat'i thubut, something that is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, not everything in the Quran has a clear meaning. So there are certain verses in the Quran that have clear meanings, what we call qat'i dalala, and there are certain things in the Quran that we call dhanni dalala. It means the meaning is not clear. So those where the meaning is not clear is not certain, because it can be interpreted. What I mean uncertain doesn't mean incredible. What it means is that the meaning, yes, of course, it's all for us. You know what it means is that what I mean it's uncertain. It means it can be explained in different ways. So the fact that it can be, that it's in the Quran, again the Quran, the fact that it can be explained in different ways, I cannot put it in the certain category. In other words, certain verses may not have a clear meaning, like al-mutashabihat, like certain things that are not clear. You know, like for example, when Allah says, "Aw lamastum an-nisa," some have explained it differently. So here, the fact that you have multiple interpretations, then I cannot take one interpretation and say this is certain. Okay? So for something to be certain in the religion, it has to be both qat'i dalala, qat'i thubut. It has to be authentic, conclusive in its authenticity, and it has to have a straightforward meaning. If it is something that is either not authentic or may not have a clear meaning, then it goes under the uncertain. Okay? So there are certain things, some things in the Quran that are uncertain in the sense that the meaning is not clear, can be interpreted differently. And also in the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Okay? Now, to take that in here, if science, in that which is certain in science, and that which is certain in religion, they cannot contradict one another, if they're both correct. In the area of overlap, again, in general, they don't overlap. In general, science and religion deal with two different things, different scopes. But sometimes they overlap. In that area of overlap, only in that area of overlap, if science is certain and religion is correct and certain, they cannot contradict one another. And in Islam, we have found no contradiction between that which is established in science as fact, you know, and that which is authentic in Islam, that is certain in Islam. There's no contradiction. Okay? How could a contradiction happen? You know, either when one of them is certain and the other one is not, or when both of them are certain. That's how a contradiction actually could happen. In other words, if you have something in science that is uncertain, but Islam actually is clear about, then here there could be a contradiction. But here, the contradiction is not with the knowledge itself. It's uncertain in science. That's why the rule is that which is uncertain in one is explained in light of that which is certain in the other. Okay? So that which is uncertain in one way or the other should be explained in light of that which is certain in the other. So the contradiction could happen only in that situation. So in Islam, that which is certain in one does not contradict that which is certain in the other. We have not found anything. I mean, I challenge anybody. In Islam, where it is certain in Islam and certain in science, where there's a contradiction. If there is a contradiction, it means one or the other is questionable. Yes?
How can we call anything in science certain if you said there's like a certain confidence level that we have?
Well, there are certain laws that have been verified, where you can be certain about, or certain, for example, facts. And keep in mind, we're talking about observation and experimentation. So something that has been observed, you know, here you can be certain about it, but within that which was observed, not the extrapolation. Because sometimes some people take a fact, an observable fact, and they say, well, here, this is certain, and they extrapolate. Well, the fact is certain, but the extrapolation is not. So sometimes people add things to it, and we'll come back to that in a minute. We'll talk about evolution. Yes.
Yeah, they got the reference of that's the Maurice Bucaille.
Maurice Bucaille, yes.
Yeah, book, the Bible, the Quran, and science.
Yes.
He proves it that all the statement in the Quran is no conflict.
It's a nice book.
No conflict, but the Christians.
Yeah, this is a book by Maurice Bucaille, actually. It's called Quran, Bible, and Science. Okay? Any questions so far? Now, one of the areas of overlap, or seeming overlap, is the theory of evolution. Why is it an area of overlap? Because actually, the theory, in a way, has religious implications. That's why, subhanAllah, the topic of evolution is one of the most heated topic that people debated actually with so much, motivation and dedication and fanaticism and all of these things, because of its implications. So people, whenever they're actually discussing evolution, they have in mind the implications actually of that theory. And people sometimes are mislabeled automatically. So if a person is, let's say, if a person is defending the theory of evolution, then that person is automatically labeled as an atheist. And if a person is attacking the theory of evolution, then that person is automatically labeled as religiously motivated or a creationist. Now, however, a lot of the time, the conflicts that we observe are in a way important conflicts. In other words, some of these conflicts between Islam and between religion and science may not exist in Islam, but they come from other religions. So in other words, in Islam, it may not be an area of overlap to start with, but it comes from a different things. For example, evolution. It's a problem with the other religions because the other religions actually talk about the creation, about the age of the earth and all of these things, but Islam does not say anything about the origin of species, with the exception of Adam, and I'll come back to that. But as far as the origin of species, Islam does not say anything. So in that regard, it is not an area of overlap. So it is not a concern for us. It is a concern for the other religions, but it is not actually a concern for us. But like I said, sometimes we just import the conflicts thinking that we have the same thing. Well, that religion has that problem, it means all the religions have that problem. No, it does not. It does not have that. Now, what about the evolution, the theory of evolution itself? To discuss it actually a little bit from a scientific perspective. And by the way, I go into details in that book. If you look at that, the different arguments that are presented. Darwin, of course, anybody read Darwin, by the way? His book. What is it called? Or when was it published? 1865, 64, something like that. So it's that long, His famous book. Why was it so widely spread? And what about the credibility actually of that book? Like I said, a lot of the time we import conflicts, but they do not actually exist within Islam. Well, let me see something. It's going to be a big topic. I want to make sure that I give it enough time and not cut it in the middle. Any question about what I discussed so far, by the way? So we'll discuss the evolution after the salah, inshallah. Because otherwise we'll be cutting it in the middle. I don't want to do that. So about what we discussed so far, the whole, from the morning until now. Any question about that? Just leave that last part aside for a second. Yes?
What would be an example of something scientifically certain but religiously uncertain? Is there such a thing?
Well, yeah, of course, there's a lot of things, like gravity, for example. A lot of these things, Islam is not meant to talk about all of these, these things, The shape of the earth, for example. Now, of course, there are some indications that it's like that, but it's not really that clear. It's not that clear as far as the meaning. So there are many things in science where Islam doesn't discuss, Any other question about everything that we discussed earlier?
Just a quick comment is that I think that's why we should not try to go too far into tying uncertain
Yes,
scientific.
exactly. Absolutely. this postmodernistic approach, by the way, where we have a verse without a clear meaning. We try to sway the, or to force basically the meaning or the interpretation of that verse to fit a scientific interpretation, which is not certain to start with. And then after that, when that scientific basically information is discredited, we're discrediting the verse. That's why sometimes people exaggerate the area of basically scientific interpretation of certain Quranic verses a little too much. But you have some that are clear. Like for example, when Allah says that the gender of the fetus, for example, is determined by the father. You know the verse? أَلَمْ يَكُنْ نُطْفَةً مِنْ مَنِيٍّ يُمْنَى ثُمَّ فَجَعَلَ مِنْهُ الزَّوْجَيْنِ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنْثَى. This is from the مَنِيٍّ يُمْنَى. This is from the men. So which means that it's the male that determines the gender, of course, based on whether it gives an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. What is a man? What is a woman? Even that is a question today.
But that's a good example where people may say that it's certain science. If they don't dig deeply, they actually don't know it's an uncertain area, is gender.
The what?
The gender.
The X and Y?
No. The gender identity.
Yes. No, I'm making a joke.
Yeah.
That was a joke. No, what I'm saying is that sometimes people take that too far. I'm talking about the biological male and female. I'm not talking about the social constructs and all of that. That's different. Any other question or comments?
دكتور you said قطعي الدلالة قطعي الثبوت.
Yes.
And what was the other one?
ظني الدلالة and ظني الثبوت. No, قطعي الدلالة means it's authentic. قطعي الثبوت means it's conclusive in its authenticity. Like the whole Quran is قطعي الثبوت. And also the ahadith المتواترة are also what we call قطعي الثبوت. So in other words, it's all conclusively said by the Prophet or the Quran and all of that, Now, ظني dalala means it's most likely, and of course it could be varying degrees of that. Some of it could be closer to the qat'i, some of it actually could be further apart. And we're talking about ظني, قطعي dalala means the meaning is clear. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَنْ لَا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ. This is it. There's no way you can explain it in different ways. So here there's something that's called قطعي الدلالة. It's clear. But sometimes it's called ظني الدلالة, means the meaning can be interpreted differently. Okay? Wallah khair, inshallah. Is it okay if we break now, or unless somebody has any question, inshallah we'll be resuming after the dhuhr. What's the time frame for now?
So half an hour is going to be
The what?
prayer. So
In half an hour? What about the lunch
lunch will be half an hour
as well?
as well. So we'll
Okay.
be back at 2:00.
What time is it now?
4:45.
So 2 o'clock we'll be back here?
We'll be back.
Okay? So 2 o'clock inshallah we'll be back here. Okay? Jazakumullah khair, alhamdulillah.
Just wanted to make a few quick announcements about some upcoming mass events. There is a youth camp next week that is going on.